Favourite this tweet is Happy Birthday Jimin. Happy Birthday Jimin. We won't play his songs, but we'll talk about you all over social media. Do you like Boy With Love? Yes, favourite this tweet, and it's like...
Why don't you stop using these groups for social clout and actually maybe integrate them into your standard spins?
Wouldn't that be some goss?
Hi, welcome to TTK. Stop! Last Friday, we were interviewed by the biggest news corporation in the Middle East. It's a long story, so it's just an odd story.
It's probably quite a short story.
It's not that long. If you're new here, please make sure you press subscribe and also the bell notification button and allow all post notifications. And that's it. You're not having my hand. If you've been living under a very large rock,
A very internet-shaped rock.
BTS were the first foreign act to perform in a sellout stadium performance in Saudi Arabia. Now, they performed at the King Faad Stadium. It was big news, not just in the Middle East, but also around the world. The BBC covered it in the UK, The Guardian. That's it, news outlets.
Basically, it's a continuation of BTS's sellout stadium tour, which they continue to do with limited radio play. As we said, just this past weekend at an event in Finsbury Town Hall, BTS are blowing up the charts, and they've managed to do that with very limited radio play.
They aren't excelling in the way that traditional talent would have excelled, where they need radio spins to get in the charts, and then charts then help fuel their stadium and arena tours.
It's kind of like, if anything, radio needs BTS more than BTS needs radio.
Yeah.
Obviously, it would be amazing if insert radio station here played BTS on their normal playlist, but as of yet, that doesn't seem to be happening on national radio. So, but what I have seen, especially all over social media, is where all these radio stations are like,
Favourite this tweet is Happy Birthday Jimin. Happy Birthday Jimin. We won't play his songs, but we'll talk about you all over social media. Do you like Boy With Love? Yes, favourite this tweet, and it's like...
Why don't you stop using these groups for social clout and actually maybe integrate them into your standard spins?
Wouldn't that be some goss?
If you juxtapose how BTS were treated when they were received in Saudi Arabia for their single stadium show to how they were received over here when they had two sellout performances at the world-renowned Wembley Stadium, it is very dissimilar. They received a king's welcome, massive news for a K-pop group to sell out a stadium. However, they weren't the first K-pop act to perform in Saudi Arabia, because that goes to Stray Kids and also Super Junior.
Yeah, they performed, I think it was the week before BTS did, they performed at... So, Stray Kids and Super Junior performed in the Jeddah Season Festival earlier, well, prior to BTS. This was articles written a few weeks ago, so I actually don't know when it was, but they performed as well. But my opinion at the moment is that if there's fans that want to enjoy something, sometimes it's not right to hold their country accountable for them.
Obviously,
to them.
In the past, people like Nicki Minaj have sold out stadium shows there, but then refused to perform because of the human rights violations and things like that. However, I think it's important to say, and RM actually referenced this, he said it was difficult, but if there's a country where people want them to go and to perform, to see their fans, to spread this positive message about love yourself, speak yourself, it's a universal thing, is it their place to make a political stance, or should they go ahead and perform?
We got an email from someone that worked at NBC One, which from my understanding is, we were told, is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, broadcasting corporation in the Middle East. And she was like, hey, we're doing a piece on K-pop and how it's growing differently around the world. We've seen that you make a lot of videos around it, and we would like to talk to you too. I was like, hey hun,
sounds cool.
My reputation precedes me.
I'll do it. She asked us to do an interview about K-pop from South Korea performing, or how it's performing in London in the UK around the time they were performing in Saudi Arabia. And I was like, 1, 2, 3.
3 corners of the world.
Sure, why not? So the interesting questions she asked us ranged from how did we get into K-pop, what is the K-pop community like in the UK, and the biggest question, which didn't make the final interview unfortunately, was the misrepresentation of K-pop fans, specifically BTS fans in the UK. We said how in the UK particularly, and actually in America too, traditional news outlets like to say that it's just young women that like K-pop groups.
Which is really problematic, because it's not. You know by now that we've made plenty of videos saying that we don't think that's the case. Obviously there's a strong contingent of young females, but that doesn't in any way affect the validity of the music itself.
If someone can align K-pop or a general pop music like One Direction, McFly in the past, with screaming young girls, it means they can demean it in traditional media. They can say, oh, it's just young girls that like this boy fad.
They have no idea what they're doing.
And it's what it does is it's discouraging other people from enjoying the music, and therefore like stops them from reaching larger audiences. And it's a problem. But hopefully through our videos we've shown that there's a great variety of K-pop fans in the UK, and that's what we tried to say in the interview.
Well, I just read in an article that women have only been able to enter the stadium and to see sports shows and stuff like that 2 years ago. So even if we go with the idea that BTS have young female audience, which they do have a large contingent, that's really nice that actually they're able to fill that audience with women and young girls that wouldn't have been able to enter that stadium 2 years ago.
So what we thought we'd do, because I really like the interview, is we're going to include it here for you to watch, but we'd also be really interested to hear your opinions, particularly if you're from Saudi Arabia or the Middle East, how BTS were received in your area of the world, and we can compare it to how they were received in the UK.
What would you criticise? Would you say the newspapers didn't cover it properly? Were they played on the radio more? Was there even coverage? Because I actually didn't see, maybe I saw 3 articles about Wembley Stadium. It's kind of like, in the UK there's kind of this thing where it's like, this act sings
Where did it happen? It's like,
this act sings in a different language, they're from a different country. How did that happen? Rather than, wow, this is happening.
Yeah, wow, it's really cool that a lot of young people and people in the UK are listening to this non-English speaking act that is performing brilliantly around the world.
And the pickup of the Korean language in the UK has shot up by 400% in the last 2 years.
Like, no big deal. Also spent some time chatting with a journalist just off camera, and I was just genuinely, for my interest, I wanted to know how popular K-pop was. I said we get a lot of K-pop groups come over, but it's still like this underground thing in the UK where it's like, it's not really spoken about.
I just think that if there was suddenly an influx of French singers to the UK and it was suddenly very popular, there would be coverage everywhere.
Yeah, they'd be on Radio 1, Capital, and it's just
like Christine of the Queens is the only French singer that I can think of, and whenever she's in the UK, she's always on Radio 1, which I love because I stan her.
Christine. So the journalist who interviewed us also said that she filmed at the Seoul Bakery for some of the context.
I compared it to a dungeon and she instantly agreed.
Yeah, she was like the K-pop dungeon, but she said that she found a lot of the K-pop stuff around the UK because of our channel. And obviously it's because it's a niche in the UK and no one really talks about the Korean culture, K-pop culture. So she said she discovered some of the places from our channel. And then I said, well, we've maybe got 3 or 4 shops in the UK that sort of specialise in K-pop, K-culture, K-beauty. Do you have many in Saudi Arabia? And she was like, oh, tons. We have so many of them. And I was like, that's really interesting. Like, maybe
we have some.
We have like 4. I think maybe because the Middle East is just exposed to more cultures directly, whereas we seem to just...
We're a little island.
We're segregated. We're just like out there in the Thames. Out there, bordering...
Who knows? Like, after Brexit, we might end up floating into the Atlantic. Just cut that.
Brexit.
I was searching online about K-pop culture in the UK, and I found your videos, and I actually love your channel.
Oh,
it's
thank
very
you.
nice. Yeah. So I was wondering, when did you start developing this kind of interest into K-pop and started making YouTube videos?
So we had a podcast with Radio 1, BBC Radio 1, and whilst we was doing that 48 episodes of talking about anything and everything, we spoke about, or we found ourselves talking about K-pop a lot. And it's kind of because we were just getting into it ourselves. Some of our viewers had tweeted us saying, hey, you might like this, because we have quite a friendly relationship with our viewers, and from there we just kind of evolved this love and appreciation for it because it was so different to what we was used to listening to.
But the community over here, it feels very close-knit, and we had a meet-up the other day in conjunction with a K-beauty and K-pop shop called Sotalab, and I'd never met any of these people, but the one thing we had between us that we could talk about was K-pop.
Wow.
And it's like, it doesn't matter who they are, where they're from.
Exactly.
You can talk about this one thing.
Yeah.
And we went everywhere. We were talking about Blackpink and how we think they're going to do in the future, and we were talking about Stray Kids, and we were talking about BTS's comeback. And it was just so interesting that we could have had nothing else in common but that, and it didn't matter.
It's a tool to communicate with others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as well, we've been doing a few videos, a series on our channel actually, where we interview people that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be, for example, BTS fans. So we've done interviews with the fan accounts themselves, because I want to get, our idea is to get into the mindset of being a fan. What is it that makes someone a fan, and why do they feel like they want to share that with other people? But also we interview mums who are
Army mums, BTS Army mums.
They are also fans of K-pop in general, but also BTS. And you know, some of them were in their late 60s, and they were saying how it's helped them bond with their kids, or it's just made them more worldly people.
Sorry that for that entire interview I looked like a school kid that was being asked questions by a teacher, like at parent-teacher, like, you know, the chats, parent-teacher night. Parents' evening. Parents' evening. Thank you for watching this video. I found it really interesting, and I just really want to hear from you guys, particularly if you're in the Middle East, how you felt BTS were received. Did you go and see them? And what is K-pop like in your country? Because
even if you're not from the Middle East, wherever you are in the world. For us in London, we've seen over time more and more people talk about it, but it still feels like here's the mainstream, here's K-pop, and it's just bubbling away. Actually, here's the mainstream, here's K-pop. They're just separate things now.
They're both massive, but there's just like this. And it's not even generational. And I wish people would stop saying that the reason K-pop is not successful in mainstream media is because it's a generational divide.
Like that lady that came up to us at the weekend, she was like, we was at an event and this lady walked over to us and she was like, can I just say, guide to the SSE Wembley Arena was genuinely really good.
Yeah,
and I was like,
helpful.
And she was in her like 60s, 50s.
Don't guess her age.
And she was a mum. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please press the subscribe button and the bell next to it, because that means you get notification when we post, when we
go live,
when we breathe, sleep, eat,
community
repeat.
tab. Big thank you to our Patreons this month. Your names are down there. You're known as our producers, and we couldn't do this without you. Well, we probably could, but you're special. So
it makes it easier.
Lots of hearts.
If you feel like supporting us on Patreon, the link is literally there. Feel free to click on it, check it out. Some of the perks might appeal to you, or they won't. Either way, have a look, and we'll see you around very soon.
Bye.
Ciao.